Hey everyone, greetings from Tulum, Mexico, and just finished my morning walk. And I just wanted to come in here and share one of the thoughts that occurred to me as I was, um, taking my walk, listening to podcasts. And usually they're typically marketing or sales related. And lately I've been quite retrospective, or introspective, is that the word? And just thinking about some of my recent gigs that I've had as a fractional CMO, and there's a bunch of thoughts that I have, and let me try and connect the dots. So, when you come into an organization as a marketer, um, you almost have to have like the ability, like stick shift, to switch gears depending on the size of the company and the life stage of the company. Um, that it took me a minute to learn. And because obviously at each stage of the company, different um, strategies, tools, and tactics are needed. Been working with a bunch of startups more in the more recent years, and I've I've come to realize that there's been a disservice with the use of the word stealth, um, and the notion of being in stealth mode. Um, here's what I mean, and I'm always going to be thinking in terms of what is helpful to sales and marketing. I'm biased, and that's always going to be the lens that I think about these things from. I think originally stealth mode was really like what it sounds, where it's, maybe you're a founder who is operating out of your garage or some co-working spot. You've got an idea and you are going to basically take, a year or some months to work on that idea. And you are keeping that idea under covers and not telling anybody about it, etc. And that's what I'm assuming stealth mode means. I think from a developer's standpoint, there might be some, if especially if you're building something disruptive, you are trying to keep your IP protected and you're trying to keep whatever you're building secretive so that you can be the first one out of the gate. Okay, that I absolutely get. What what tends to not be helpful for marketing, um, and just makes things really difficult is the fact that when you are ready, you are essentially cold. At least from a marketing and sales standpoint, they are dealing with a cold audience. And so, um, what I mean is that you literally have to spend dollars to warm up your prospects, which in this day and age just seems really dumb, right? So let me try and unpack that. Like, why spend dollars to warm up your prospects instead of launching to a warm um, pool of target customers? So how do you do that in this day and age? Well, it's usually the things that the founders, if they're not coming from the marketing discipline, it's usually the thing that they really want to do the least. First of all, most tech founders don't really care about marketing, and so when they're in stealth mode, they're not thinking about hiring a marketer. Secondly, when those technical founders are in stealth mode and focusing on building the product, the last thing they want to think about is doing anything in social media. However, If you look at the stats of how many, startups fail, um, it's a lot of them, right? What is it? 95% of them fail. And there's varying reasons as to why they fail. But a lot of times they might run out of cash before they've had the time to sort of develop the flywheel of acquisition and demand gen, because that takes time and money, right? So let me try and connect these disparate thoughts. So my thesis is that startups, like, forget about stealth mode from the yes, protect your IP, but forget about stealth mode when it comes to everything else. Um, because, like, you need to be out in the marketplace in front of your prospective audience. And you need to not be waiting until you've got the product ready to launch to be discovering what your ICP is, and who your prospects are. And no. And so my thesis is that you should actually be hiring somebody even if you're not hiring a marketer, but hire somebody who's in the marketing capacity to help you. Um, you shouldn't be coding a single line of code before you've actually spoken to whoever it is you theoretically are solving the pain point for. Okay, that's a marketing exercise. Because a lot of you build products that ultimately there's no demand for. And if you actually did the marketing exercise of talking, let's say you have a thesis about a problem that needs to be solved and you think technology can solve it, then you should be talking to the people that you think you're solving that problem for first before you write a line of code. Okay, but let's say you didn't do that. Let's say you didn't do that. Let's say now you're like, okay, I've determined that this is a problem, and I've got the technology to solve it. I'm going to go build it. Let's say you decide to do that. While you are building, obviously you have some sort of um, educated guess on who you're building it for and it's going to solve the problem for. What would be helpful to marketing and essentially to your survival would be to be in front of that prospective audience every single day. They need to know you. They need, like, people buy from people that they know and trust. People buy from companies they trust. Well, how do they determine whether they trust the company? If you're new, then maybe one of the ways they do that is because they know the founder. They've come to know the founder. So let me talk about what I mean by knowing, because you're never going to know everybody. But, for example, I listen to the podcast, the All In podcast. Okay. It's got these four founders who now are actually quite well known, but pre-COVID were probably only known in certain circles. But they have a podcast that they publish every week. And the minute one of them says, "Oh, I'm coming out of stealth mode with this. I'm launching, the wait list for XYZ product," you can bet that there's a percentage of their existing audience that immediately go and get on the wait list. You can bet that the podcast, the fact that they have been out front and center in front of an audience, whether they've done this intentionally or not, the fact is that they can now launch a new product far easier than they would have been able to had they not had the podcast. Okay, that's not groundbreaking theory, but let's talk about what is typical when founders are in stealth mode. A, they don't have anybody that resembles marketing on their team, and B, they are quiet and are busy working, and it's only when they have, the product halfway ready that they think about marketing. And then marketing has to spend a significant amount of funds, unnecessarily so, to drive awareness. When in fact, today there are tools and tactics that can enable the founder to be a known entity to their prospect way before the product launches. And so that there is credibility that's being established, there is a rapport, there is a knowing, there is a familiarity, there is a gradual over a period of time. Um, uh, there's an audience that gets established that feels like they know the founder. That's marketing, right? Um, there are founders today who are very good at that, and we know them. You know how we know them? Because you can name them, right? How do you know them? Because they're out there. They are out front and center. Okay? They're out having conversations, not necessarily having conversations about their category specifically, but now you even know their points of view across varied topics, and you establish a sense of, um, I'm just going to keep on using that word knowing, right? Like, and familiarity. So when you are ready to launch a product, you are launching to a warm audience. And this works for, small businesses that are not in tech. My lens is always tech, because that's where I've spent, the bulk of my career. But really, my main point is if you are in stealth mode, if you are building a product right now, I think you need to reimagine how you define stealth mode. You need to get the founder out there. You need to get the other team members out there, out in front of their prospective audience in social media, talking about things that might be relevant to their whoever the ICP ultimately ends up being, because that ends up being refined as you go, obviously. But if you are right at the beginning, you have an opportunity to actually test this. If you are right at the beginning of building a new product, advising people on a new product, some of you are senior marketers who I've worked with before and are advising startups. I would recommend, if you are able to convince them to not write a single line of code before they have actually spent at least 3 months talking to a potential pool of prospects. And if they're not able to do that, and they have identified who they're building for, get them in front of them. Whether it's a podcast, a social media, get them interviewing their prospects on a podcast. Do that for a year. Build an audience so that when you launch your product, you're launching to an audience that trusts you and is at least going to give you your product a trial. Yeah, I've been accused of repeating myself. I think I've repeated myself 3 times. So yeah, that's really the point I wanted to make today. Forget about stealth mode. Stealth mode is not helpful to your sales and marketing, and you need sales and marketing to be on point in order to make sure your startup lives. Have a good one.